Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. I'm Adam Putnam. I'm an assistant professor in the psychology department. And this is a webinar with some recent psychology alums. And I think this is a great opportunity for you to see the kinds of things you can do with a psychology or neuroscience degree from Furman. The plan for today is I'll have each of the panelists briefly introduce themselves, sort of what year they graduated from Furman, what their major was, and what they're currently doing. And then I have a few planned questions that I think will take us about 30 minutes or so to get through. But then I want to leave lots of time for all of you to ask questions. So if a question pops up in your head as you're going along, feel free to drop that into the chat. There's also the Q&A option. You can use that as well. I'll be monitoring both of those. And I'm hoping by a little after 1 o'clock or so, we'll get to an open Q&A. And if you feel comfortable hopping on video and asking a question, you can do that, or you can drop your questions into the chat. But anyways, I think this is a really cool opportunity, so thanks so much for coming. So I'm going to have our panelists introduce ourselves. We'll start with the most senior and work our way down. So Hillary, do you want to briefly tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. I will claim my seniority. Friends, hi, my name is Hillary Taylor. I graduated in 2012. I am an ordained United Methodist minister here in the South Carolina Annual Conference, and currently I work as a chaplain at Prisma Health here in Greenfield. I have previously pastored churches, and I also do some work volunteering with an anti-death penalty organization here in South Carolina.
Awesome. Thanks, Hillary. And Rose, you want to tell us about yourself?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Rose. I'm coming to you live from Philadelphia. I'm currently an assistant coach up here at the University of Pennsylvania in the Ivy League with women's soccer. And a little bit about my background. I majored in psychology at Furman, graduated in December of 2016. Really loved my experience there. Went on to coach at a few other Division I universities for a while. Also have a background in student athlete development and athletic administration. So kind of working with student athletes on and off the field is what I love to do, and excited to chat with you.
Thanks, Rose. Ted?
Yo, what's up, everybody? I'm Ted Summer. I graduated in 2016 from Furman with a neuroscience and Chinese double major. And I'm currently in Denver, Colorado as a senior software engineer at Devetry, which is a consulting and custom software agency. Actually, as of this morning, I'm starting at a new company called Replit, so check that out as well if you're interested in learning to code. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Great. And our most recent alum, Nicole.
Yes, hello. I'm Nicole Greenfield. I just graduated last year. I studied psychology and economics, and I now work as a research associate at YouGov, which is a international research and data analytics group whose goal is to understand what the world thinks. So basically what I do is custom survey research for a number of clients to understand kind of what people think about their product or brand or all sorts of stuff.
Awesome, thank you. So as you can see, we've got a nice diversity of experiences here. And I know when we were trying to find alums for this panel, we looked specifically for people who didn't necessarily just go straight onto a career in academia in psychology or in clinical psychology. So we tried to find people who are doing other types of things. So I have a bunch of questions here, and I told the panel I'll ask them generally, and probably not everyone will answer every single question, but we'll see where the conversation goes. And so the first question, obviously all of you spent approximately 4 years plus or minus a semester or two at Furman. What were some of the experiences during your time at Furman that had the biggest impact either on your life or your career?
I can start. So classes or experience or different things that I did at Furman that impacted me later on. There was certainly a wealth of opportunities at Furman that I was really lucky to take advantage of. In large part, they're ones that I didn't know existed until they were offered to me by a professor or a peer. So some of my favorite moments largely centered around a lot of my relationships with the psychology faculty. getting close to my professors, that leading to research opportunities. I was able to do research in the social cognition laboratory with Dr. H, Dr. Hoda, for those of you who know her as well. So that was really awesome, and we got to publish together. And I think that experience really allowed me to understand all I can gain from developing relationships with people who have a wealth of experience. Whether I'm looking to go exactly into their field or not, it was an awesome opportunity to grow and kind of stretch myself in areas that I didn't think I was even capable of, i.e. analyzing data and writing and publishing a paper. Not necessarily my strong suit, or at least I thought. So that was a really great experience, and I've been able to leverage that in terms of getting other jobs and working with data. I mean, that's something that a lot of jobs that you might be looking into would ask you to do in some shape or form. So that was a great experience. And then in addition to that, I did 2 Furman Advantage opportunities, and the other one was an internship with the Greenfield Drive in downtown. And Furman really allowed me, by supporting me financially, to take advantage of that opportunity. So that was more marketing, sports, out in the field. So those were 2 of my favorite experiences that Furman really helped me pursue.
And I know before we chat, you were talking about how you're an assistant coach thinking about like athletic directing. So it sounds like that type of mentor-mentee relationship is something that's really shaped your career trajectory in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. I think in general, like having the experience of working with a supervisor in a close realm like that, and then utilizing that, whether in a job interview, talking about how I work well one-on-one with a supervisor, or in management roles, if I was working, gathering data and bringing in, I'm going to use the word recruits because that's like my athletic mind, but bringing in people to do the study and managing those people, those were great experiences that were built into my academic career there.
I would like to add on to that too. Actually, yeah, I agree with everything Rose said. And I guess just to summarize, like ask yourself like 3 questions, like find any task or project, and then ask yourself like, do I get to make like really important decisions? Are those decisions challenging? And like, am I learning anything? And you should answer yes to all 3 of those. And if you can, then I think even if it's not research, like it can be whatever. Yeah, it's probably the most important thing you could do right now. That's it.
It's just making sure you're involving projects that are challenging and you're learning something, and it's interesting. Yeah, awesome.
I think Ted made a good point too, like whether it's research or not, whether you're looking at internships or just like volunteering on campus, it doesn't have to be the exact type of job or role that would connect to your career goals. Like having a job or role in general that allows you responsibility and opportunities to be creative or grow, any of those you can translate in your own words to your next opportunity.
Hillary or Nicole, anything to add on to those?
I was going to say, yeah, I second all of that. That's also really important. So I was going to say I did 2 research experiences, I guess one with the econ department, one with the psych, that were really helpful and informative. But I think something that also really like helped my career today was also, I was very involved in mock trial, even though it's not directly like related to what I do with survey research, but it really helped me, I guess, develop like the project management skills that I have and leadership skills. So a lot of that has really helped and had an impact on my career.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what I want to say falls into the second question, but let me speak to the classes piece. Because I'm somebody who does religious and spirituality kinds of work, I found myself always trying to connect everything that I was studying. And so sometimes I found that like some psychology professors didn't really know what to do with me because I was religious, and I also like, was passionate about like good research. Not that I was good at researching, let me be clear. I think the research methods course in a lot of ways still, like, I still think about that, and I still think like how angry I am that was the only C that I ever got in college. But how grateful I am to know like what does it look like to do good research. So I think about my research, the 201, 202 course a whole lot. And I always tried to figure out like, okay, how do I like think about childhood development and adolescence with my poverty studies classes and my poverty studies major? What is it about, this studying of the Book of Revelation in Dr. Crow-Tipton's class on apocalyptic literature? How does that inform sort of people's experiences in, modern day church, right? An environment where I wanted to go and work in. But also, what is the historical sort of nature of like liberation theology, both in South Africa and also in parts of Latin America? And how does that inform how I want to give spiritual care? So I think a lot about the classes and the ways that I tried to make them as intersectional as possible, in a lot of ways that I think without a liberal arts education, like it's just really hard to, and it's not necessarily intuitive.
Yeah, just hearing you describe that just makes you think that's what the liberal arts degree is all about, right? Which is having this sort of broad experience of in a lot of different classes, and it might not be perfectly related to your career, but a few years down the road, you might discover, oh, actually, this is totally relevant to something I'm doing right now in ways you might not have expected. Yeah. So you've touched on this a little bit already, but what if you were able to go into a time machine and talk to the freshman version of yourself, so about to show up on campus? What advice would you give that younger version of yourself?
Do something you're afraid to do, and something that even you might think you're bad at. Even if it confirms that, yes, you're still bad at it, at least, like I did this thing and I'm proud to say that I did it. And I have no questions about whether I'm good at it or not good at it. And you might find like, oh, wow, this is a skill set I can log away for another time.
Yeah, I would add, be willing to reach out. There's so many people at Furman who choose their job so that they can help you as a student. And sometimes you might think that they just have selected this role. This is what they always wanted to do. They really want to help you. And so I think when I've really connected with either professors or advisors or administrators, for me, it was also coaches as a student athlete at Furman. Those relationships have carried me in a lot of ways and continue to do so. A few years ago, I moved to Nebraska, and like 5 of my psych professors came to my little going away party years after I'd graduated. And those are relationships I still carry now. So I think take advantage of the relationships. And importantly, like when you do reach out to someone, reach out that first time, but also follow up, continue following up, because those are going to be really important for you later.
I can just say, don't stress about school. I don't know. Just try, do your best, but it's not the end of the world, which I'm sure we're going to repeat multiple times in this discussion. But yeah, go outside, enjoy the campus. It's really nice. Enjoy your friends, like they were just saying. Yeah, try to relax a little bit. Don't just lock yourself up in your room or your library and study, because that's kind of what I did, and I definitely regret it. So.
Just study a little bit, but don't overdo it.
Yeah, I was gonna say if I could go back to my younger self, which isn't that long ago, I would just say chill out. You're doing fine, Nicole. You're, you don't have to stress out. So.
Yeah, and this is a question that wasn't specifically on there, but I think this comes up. So I know there's a tension. I'm young enough, I can remember this too, of having a sense of my senior year, realizing, oh man, I got to figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life, and bring this immense pressure. And it wasn't until a few years later I realized, oh, maybe I didn't have to have absolutely everything planned out. And so I know some of you have spoken a little bit about your career paths, but I'm just curious if you could reflect a bit on kind of what you imagined developing a career was going to be like as a student, and then what it has actually been like. What has your actual experience been like in building a career?
Go ahead, Rose.
You go, Ted. I'll you.
Okay. Yeah, I thought I was going to get a PhD in neuroscience the whole time I was in school. And then I talked with a few professors kind of senior year, Dr. Hahn and Dr. Walmsley, who kind of convinced me I needed to take some time and think about it a bit more, because I really wasn't, I guess, too sold on it still by the end. So I did research for a year with Dr. Walmsley as like a lab manager. And luckily enough, like I got the opportunity to like start programming a lot for the lab, and realized that was something I really enjoyed. Then I went to grad school and got a master's in CS. I guess like in general, like I even know people still, like my age, like almost 30, who like don't know what they're doing, or what they want to do. I have friends in grad school right now who still don't know what they want to do when they get out. So I don't know. Again, like don't stress about it is all I can say.
Yeah, I feel like so often when you really have a set plan, that's really an opportunity for things to change. So being willing to be flexible with your ideas of what success will look like to you, and being flexible with your ideas of what your job path will look like to you. I kind of went through college the whole time feeling like I was going to go and get a PhD in counseling psychology with an emphasis in sport. And I really really pestered all of the professors to support me in that and get on my thesis panel and help me do research in sport, which they currently hadn't done yet. And they were all so supportive and helpful, and it was wonderful. And then I applied to PhD programs in counseling psych. I'm not sure how much you guys know about those interview processes yet, but I went on my interviews and they're like 2 or 3 days a piece or whatever, and I'm there and I'm kind of like, wait a second. I don't know if I'm like the rest of these people. They seem like they fit really well. I'm not sure if I do. Am I doing the right thing? And that was in my interview process where I'd already kind of said this is what I wanted to do. So I ended up getting into some, getting deferred and rejected from others, and kind of like use that as a wait a second, maybe I should think things through. And so my first job was actually at Furman University, my first big girl job coaching the team that I played for, which was awesome. But it allowed me a little bit of time to think more about what I wanted and not so much about what I said 2 or 3 years ago I wanted. And so if that happens for any of you, know that it's not a you thing, that's kind of an everybody thing, and lean into that and be willing to have kind of reflective conversations with yourself and with people who know you well, because things can change.
So when I came to Furman, I had wanted to be a pastor since I was 13, and that was kind of born out of like, wrestling with family trauma and finding belonging in my home church. And Furman was really that place where I thought, oh God, like, do I actually want that? Because there are all these things that I'm seeing that really disturb me about, the place that I want to work in. And so much anxiety was brought on by the Southern Africa study away trip that I actually did through Dr. Mahar and Dr. Khan, and a couple of other professors at Furman as well. But that really was sort of this ground shaking experience for me, where I felt like, everything was ripped out from underneath me. Mostly because I was furious with the ways that the tradition that I loved had been part of so much systematic oppression and terrible awfulness. And so it really threw me into a tailspin, into a depression. I was really terrible at the summer research job that I did with Dr. Khan that summer. So I decided that, like, okay, I need to take a break before I actually decide to go to seminary, which is sort of the theology school, grad school piece, if you're not familiar with that track. So I took 3 years and I worked with a young adult volunteer program affiliated with the United Methodist Church. I spent 1.5 years in South Africa, so I actually ended up going back. And I worked with students who were studying theology to become pastors. I connected their classroom experiences with organizations in the community, working with orphans and folks affected by HIV/AIDS, and people who had children who had different types of disabilities, and different community development organizations. And then for the last 1.5 years of my service, I worked as a financial coach in a nonprofit that was working with under-resourced communities, people who were trying to get out of poverty. And so using essentially the tools of capitalism to defeat capitalism. So I learned how to file taxes. I learned how to read credit reports. I learned how to, fight identity theft, help people make budgets, and help people qualify for first-time home buyership loans. Things I never, like, none of my psychology major prepared me to do that. The only reason I sort of knew like that these were things to do was because of my intro to poverty studies class, where we talked about economic, ways that people fall into poverty, through payday loans, through identity theft. I worked in a community with a lot of day laborers and farm workers and people who worked in the hospitality industry. Through all of that, I decided, okay, I do still want to be a pastor, but now I know exactly the kind of pastor I want to be. I want to be a pastor that connects churches to communities and communities to churches. Went through grad school, did lots of different internships, including one in a prison. Learned that I also really like teaching theology, and I like teaching theology with people who maybe don't always have access to theology, like in prison. I got into the church, decided that I needed a break from that. Currently doing work as a hospital chaplain, which I never really thought I wanted to do because I got into, the Furman psychology program and realized, ooh, counseling, like that's a lot. I don't really want to do counseling. And so learning what it means to be a chaplain, but what it means to not be a therapist or a counselor in the process. It's allowed me to use some of the skills that I already have in terms of my interventions as a pastor, but in a medical setting, and how interesting that is, when you're in the middle of the night and there's a gunshot wound victim who comes in and it was an accidental discharge and they're really scared about what's going to happen. What is it that I can do to bring that person comfort and peace, and maybe help them get in touch with their family members so that they feel less stressed? That was a lot of talking. I apologize. But yeah, all that to say, like, you have no clue what's going to happen. And sometimes it's okay to let go of a dream and also sort of see where your spirit is leading you. If you feel that something is life-giving in ways that you didn't expect it, maybe listen to what your spirit is telling you.
Thanks, Hillary. Yeah, I think that really that kind of shifty, windy path. I think that's true for so many of us, right? Like, I think we all know people who it's like they go from A to B to C, but I think that's not normal, right? I think we all have a perception that that's how it should be, but in fact, our paths are often much, much windier. Nicole, I know you just graduated fairly recently, and since I had conversations with you, I remember talking with you on the phone, trying to decide, like, you had multiple options available to you as a senior, and what were some of those options, and how did you end up deciding to pursue the job at YouGov?
Oh, that was so difficult. Well, yeah, so I was like really lucky, and I had some job offers that I had to decide between. But before that, I guess going back to kind of what we were going, I was like very all over the place at the beginning of Furman. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was like, oh, law school sounds interesting, or politics, or research. And I was all over the place. And I think around like research methods and stats, I was like, oh, okay, definitely like research. But what kind of research? Then, I mean, even my senior year, I just spent all year like applying to all these jobs, like all across the board of like all these things, because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. But I had like so many different ideas, and then I ended up with this job at YouGov, which I'm very happy with. And I also got a job at, oh my gosh, American Institutes for Research is a nonprofit in DC. There's a research job there. And I also had an opportunity with Adam's research advisor doing research in his lab, which was also like a really amazing opportunity. It was just like a very difficult kind of position, but I know that at YouGov, I just kind of really like their mission. And I think, also another thing with the research position at, what was it, WashU? Yes, it was Washington. There was a time where I was like, oh, maybe I'll go get a PhD in psychology or econ. And that was kind of like my path. And I think the more I like learned about it and like learned about people's experiences and then kind of like what I wanted, out of it, I guess I kind of fell off of like, oh, like maybe I don't want to do, or maybe I want to do it later, but not like right now. I'd rather have more like, I guess like a real life experience, or like working at different companies or in different, I mean, so that's kind of, and this was also a remote position, which I really liked. So, and I just, that was probably a really bad answer, but I was like all over the place. It was really difficult. But hey, I still don't really know what I'm doing with my life. Just like as everyone else says, we're learning. There's going to be more twists and turns down the road, and just see what happens.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer, Nicole, right? And I think kind of echoing back to something Ted said, right? Like you're probably feeling like you're doing something difficult and you're learning something that's challenging. And if you get to a point in your job where that's not happening, like that's the sign that it's time to start thinking about something else, right? Like maybe you ask for a promotion, or you start thinking maybe I should go back and look at graduate school now that you have a couple of years of work experience under your belt. So. One question, and this was not on the list I gave you, so I apologize, but it came there. I think it's an interesting question, which is, I know when you're thinking about like opportunities after, like that first thing after college, right? You're kind of thinking about where do you want to be? Is it something fun? Is it something that's going to advance my career? Am I going to get paid to do this, right? Like I think those are all factors that every one of those is important. So I'm curious, like, as each of you was sort of first launching from Furman, like what were the major factors that you were thinking about? And looking back on it now, would you still consider those the most important factors?
I can go. I mean, obviously everyone's experience is incredibly different. But in my case, as I mentioned, I was like doing research with Dr. Walmsley and got to start teaching myself to code and building things on my own. And I just found it incredibly fun. And so I was like, this is what I want to pursue like right now. Like I'm just going to dig deep into it after spending about a year doing that. And definitely financially, like that was like pretty motivating. I mean, like software is a great field to go into if you want to, make money. But it's also a great place to like solve problems and challenge yourself. Yeah, I would just say like whatever you're feeling. I don't know, it's like a crummy answer as well, but if you're struggling financially, like, and it's going to stress you out to like go do a job that's not going to pay enough, like maybe just take something that is going to get you in a more stable place and like a healthy mental state where you can then pursue some other interests and keep doing something on the side. But otherwise, like just go for it, whatever you're feeling.
Yeah, I think like Ted kind of makes a good point in terms of like everyone's going to have a different priority for their first role after. Maybe it's finances, maybe it's opportunity or location or something. I think one thing that I've really benefited from, and in fairness, it's not something you always have the intel on before you take a role, but working with someone or for someone who you really admire and finding opportunities to work with people who want to grow you and are open-minded. So I say that meaning, my first job was actually at Furman, working for a coach who recruited me when I was 15 years old. So we knew each other pretty well. I got pretty lucky. But that job, taking that financially, it wasn't like I wasn't over the moon about it, but I knew it was a job where if I had ideas or if I had thoughts, it was going to be a place where I could build upon those and take on more responsibilities. And so I kind of prioritized my growth as a professional in that role. And that really served me well. Given I kind of had more insight on him as a boss, probably than most people do in their first jobs, but through the interview process and whatever is next for you, making sure you understand the type of people you're going to be working for. Because sometimes that can even make or break your perception of an industry that may or may not be true. I mean, think of maybe classes you took in college or taking rather in college, and maybe the professor really made that one subject interesting or really made it miserable to go to class, right? It's the same thing in your work environment. Sometimes people have more of an impact than you think. So being around the right ones can open a lot of doors.
Thanks, Rose.
I was drawn to service projects because it was a way for me to have health insurance after school. And even though I didn't really earn a lot of money, and I was in a position where I didn't need to earn a lot of money either, but it was a way to defer student loans if I did have any. And most service programs do that. And so I think my advice is if you're having trouble deciding what to do, take some time off and do something that connects your heart and your brain and your body.
Okay. So I think I want to make sure we have time for students to ask questions too. So one last question for all of you is like, is there anything that you would like to talk about that we haven't touched on yet today? So are there any things that you're thinking like, oh, I think this is like an important piece of this really murky, ambiguous process of sort of figuring out who you are and what you're going to do with your life? Has there been anything that we haven't touched on yet, or any other nuggets of advice that you'd like to share with our current Furman students?
Rose talked about connection to professors. I also want to say, remember to connect to your peers. So I mentioned briefly that I do some anti-death penalty work in South Carolina right now. So that's part advocacy, a little bit of community organizing, lots of networking, some of the like building pieces of like how to put an organization together because it's a new nonprofit. A lot of my anti-death penalty stuff actually comes from a moment my senior year of college where my friend Courtney, who was at the time the president of Furman's NAACP chapter, asked me if I would help lead a vigil to honor Troy Davis, who was going to be executed. And so I still think about that as a way that I first began to interrogate an unjust system, how my peers influenced me and have helped me sort of shape an understanding, not just of an institution like the death penalty, but also about criminal justice reform and systematic racism, right? We talk about implicit bias a lot in social psychology, and how my psych degree informs my activism, and also my relationships inform my activism as well.
Thanks, Hillary.
I think one thing I would add, and obviously you guys attending this call are the types of students who are taking advantage of opportunities. So maybe it's a little selective bias here, but I think in general, understanding that your years at Furman are some of the most filled with opportunity and opportunities for connection that you might ever have. And I don't mean to say that in a scary way. I mean to say it in an exciting way. But the truth is like when you move on to the next phase of your life as an adult in a working environment, you're not living down the hall from people who have similar interests than you necessarily. You aren't going to class with large groups of people every day now that we're out of COVID. You're not around professors who have dedicated their professional careers to helping you all the time. So I guess I say that to really keep front of mind is like take advantage of what's in front of you. And if you aren't sure what's in front of you, ask people what could be available to you, because there's so much you can do, and you will most likely regret it if you don't take advantage of that now, because it will change eventually. It's going to be a lot more onus on you and your professional life to create connections, create opportunities. So take advantage of that now, value it now. I certainly valued my time at Furman, and looking back, I'm like, gosh, I wish I could have done even more, and that's certainly a natural feeling to have, but you can be active in how you approach that now, because it's a truly wonderful place with wonderful people.
Yeah, I second all of that. And I guess like maybe a kind of silly thing to add as well as like all you have is you. And like the sooner you start learning to love yourself and love yourself more, like the better your life is going to be. So yeah, just work on yourself and caring about yourself, surround yourself with people that build you up. And that's what's really important.
Yeah, so I second everything what everyone said, but on a different note, if you don't know what an informational interview is, you should definitely do it. You should make a LinkedIn, reach out to alumni. Like, they will almost always be happy to talk to you. Like, if you're ever interested in what I'm doing, like, reach out to me. Like, I'll talk to you out. Like, we're happy to do that. And that was like super helpful on my journey of finding jobs. And like, I got like some like interviews and even positions from people that I talked to at Furman. Like, so it's like, it's huge. And yeah, anyway.
Yeah, Furman alum love other Furman alum, like hands down. Like, and Furman alums want to help you for real. Like everything Nicole said.
I was just going to say, I bet you made Rebecca very happy, our psychology rep from the Malone Center, Nicole. And I know Melanie and Rebecca, who are on this call, would be happy to help any of you connect with alums. So it's 1:07 now. So if any of the attendees have questions for the panelists, this is a great time to ask those questions. So you can raise your hand, and I'll bring you into the panel. You can ask a question on video, or you can drop a question into the chat. We'll sit here for a minute or two, and then I've got some backup questions here just in case no one else has anything to say. Let's see here. All right, Sam Gary, a senior, has got a question. Hi, Sam.
Yes, I wanted to ask, have any of you ever gotten into a position or a program or something and you realize it's like not a good fit for you? What kind of makes you realize that, and then how do you pivot from there?
I certainly have. Maybe getting into positions that just aren't ideal for you. Maybe you like 50% of your job responsibility, you don't enjoy the other 50%. And I guess the biggest thing that I would really suggest, because it's bound to happen, whether it's a full-time job you have or a random experience or a volunteer opportunity, it's bound to happen in some shape or form, right? And I always suggest like making the most of where you are now and what you have now. So if you go into an opportunity, you realize it's not for you, and you don't take advantage of the opportunity to grow there, you can still be thinking about where you're going to go next, or maybe start looking into other options. But I would always say, like, the best way to handle that situation, they always say, like, bloom where you're planted. Like, try to grow there, still try to connect here, still try to work really hard and leave it in a better place than you found it. Because while it might not be the perfect fit for you, it's serving a purpose still. So I would just really suggest that in terms of when I've gotten into spots where I feel like I'm more stuck, I'm still trying to make the most of it and seeing what I can get out of it in terms of growth and opportunity as well. And then utilizing my efforts there to pivot me into the next spot.
So when I was a pastor, I was a pastor for 3 years in 2 small churches in a very small town in South Carolina. And things were fine, but when COVID happened, I began to realize, okay, my safety is not a priority in this place. And that was really hard. And so there were 2 choices I could make. I could quit, immediately, effectively, or I could stick it out until I rotated off of my contract, which was going to take about 15 months. The 2 options were they both had their pros and cons. They will both cost you something. And so whether you decide, okay, I need to leave immediately, or I'm going to take some time, until I can leave, quote unquote, gracefully. I think the thing one needs to think about is, what is this going to cost me in the long run? And is what it's going to cost me worth it? So yeah, I think those are the 2 questions I would posit for you.
Spoken like a true minister. Someone asks a question and you give them 2 questions back instead of any good answers. I think they're like professors in that way. as we're getting close to wrapping up, I am going to put a quick link into the chat here. So if you are a student attending, there's just a couple of quick questions we'd like you to answer about this panel. I think that would be really helpful for us to get some feedback on what was informative and helpful for you. Melanie and Rebecca, is there anything else that either of you would like to mention, that, especially in terms of the office or the services both of your offices can provide?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing is that I noticed this is being recorded, so which is super helpful. And I also wanted to note that all the other alumni panels that we've either been involved with or hosted ourselves in the Loan Center are also recorded and posted on our YouTube channel. So I can pop that link in the chat as well. So if you're interested in watching other panels similar to this to hear from alums, you can do that through our YouTube channel. And then, like Nicole said, if you're interested in starting that sort of informational interview process, or you've never made a LinkedIn, you're unsure how to even begin, come to us for help. We're happy to kind of walk you through that and provide guidance every step of the way. And I know Melanie's office is great with connecting students to alumni as well. So kind of along those lines, like, don't be afraid to ask for those resources and the help that's there to, guide you through this process. But I appreciate you all. Y'all had great advice. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. And just a further note too, that Rebecca probably won't mind me saying too, is I feel like sometimes there's a perception, oh, the career scene, you go there when you're a senior, but no, you should go talk to them, go meet Rebecca, even if you're a freshman or a sophomore, even if you're kind of like, I have no idea what I want to do, they can help you start to both narrow that down and help start giving you some tools to think about how you might go seek out some experiences that some of these high impact learning experiences that can help you get some input about what the next steps in your career might look like. Thanks so much for coming today. All of our panelists said they're happy to answer further questions. So we'll stick around for a couple minutes if people have one or more questions they want to do. Or if you want to reach out via email, contact me, adam.putnam@furman.edu, and I'll be happy to put you in touch with our panelists. So and Ted dropped his email right into the chat there. Thanks, Ted. So yeah, let's virtually thank our 4 panelists for taking some time out of their busy days, and enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a good weekend. Thanks for coming.